Is Guyana getting rich? After the discovery of massive offshore oil fields, the small South American nation is now positioned to become one of the world's wealthiest.
Something feels different in the Caribbean right now. A small country that many people once overlooked is now one of the fastest growing oil producers in the world. Billions of US dollars are flowing in. Massive offshore ships are pumping oil day and night. Global headlines are calling it one of the biggest oil stories of this century. But behind the excitement, behind the celebrations, behind the production numbers, there is one uncomfortable question that keeps coming up quietly in conversations across the region. Who is really in control? Is Guyana fully steering its own oil future? Or does Exxon Mobil hold more power than most people realize? Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you may see the situation very differently.
They're complaining about every single provision when the IHS markets experts who looked at the contract said the contract was effectively one-sided in Exxon's favor. So they already have a favorable contract.
When oil was first discovered offshore Guyana in 2015, it changed everything overnight. Before that discovery, Guyana was not seen as a major energy country. There was no long history of oil production. There was limited technical experience in deepwater drilling. Then suddenly, Exxon Mobil announced massive finds in the Stabroek Block. The discoveries were not small, they were world-class, billions of barrels. Now think about this carefully. When a small country with limited offshore experience discovers billions of barrels of oil, who has the expertise? Who has the technology? Who has the billions of dollars needed to develop it fast? The answer was Exxon Mobil. Exxon became the operator of the Stabroek Block. That means Exxon runs the offshore operations. Exxon decides how drilling happens. Exxon manages the floating production ships. Exxon organizes the technical side of production. But the production sharing agreement signed between Guyana and Exxon Mobil is where the real debate begins, because while Guyana owns the oil underground, Exxon controls the speed, the costs and the structure of production. Under the Stabroek Block agreement, Exxon recovers its exploration and development costs first. This is called cost oil. Up to 75% of production revenue in a given year can go toward Exxon and its partners recovering expenses. The remaining profit oil is then split 50-50 between Guyana and the consortium. On paper, that sounds straightforward, but here's the part that many people across the Caribbean quietly question. Who audits the costs? Who verifies that billions in expenses are accurate? Who has the technical capacity to challenge a company the size of Exxon? And remember, Exxon Mobil is not just any company. This is one of the largest oil corporations in the world, operating in dozens of countries with decades of deepwater experience. For a country that only began producing oil in 2019, that imbalance matters. Now let's be clear, without Exxon Mobil, Guyana's oil boom would not have moved this fast. The floating production ships offshore, massive engineering platforms, cost billions each. The deepwater drilling technology required is highly specialized. Few companies on Earth can execute projects at this scale. That's the reality. But dependence creates leverage. If production schedules slow, national revenue projections change. If development plans are adjusted, government budgets feel it. If new projects are delayed, future earnings shift. Operational control translates into economic influence. And that's why the question isn't emotional, it's structural. Is Guyana building enough independent technical capacity fast enough? Because right now, Exxon operates the offshore fields. Exxon manages the development timeline. Exxon submits the cost reports. Exxon runs the production infrastructure. Meanwhile, Guyana is racing to strengthen its regulatory agencies, train petroleum engineers, and build oversight institutions almost in real time. The oil being pumped offshore Guyana doesn't just matter to Georgetown. It matters to Washington. It matters to Beijing. It matters to global energy markets. The United States has taken a noticeable interest in Guyana's security. Joint military exercises have increased. Diplomatic visits have accelerated. High-level energy discussions are happening more frequently. Why? Because Guyana is now one of the fastest-growing oil producers in the world. That changes its strategic value overnight. And when geopolitics enters the equation, the power balance becomes even more complex. Here's another uncomfortable reality. Production levels are rising rapidly. Multiple floating production vessels are already online, with more planned. Output is projected to exceed 1 million barrels per day in the coming years. That would place Guyana ahead of several long-established regional producers. But speed comes with risk. When production expands this quickly, regulatory systems can struggle to keep pace. Environmental oversight becomes critical. Revenue management becomes crucial. Transparency becomes essential. And this is where the deeper conversation starts. It's not just about whether Exxon has operational control. Of course it does. That's what operators do. The real issue is long-term national leverage. Over time, will Guyana renegotiate future contracts differently? Will local content laws expand local participation enough to reduce dependency? Will state institutions mature fast enough to match the scale of the industry? Or will the structure created in the early years shape the country's oil future for decades? Because contracts signed at the beginning of a boom often echo the loudest. To be fair, supporters argue that Guyana struck the best deal it could at the time. In 2015, oil prices were low. The basin was unproven. Risk was high. Exxon took that risk. Critics argue that once the discoveries proved world-class, leverage shifted, but the contract remained largely unchanged. That tension hasn't disappeared. And it's not anti-development to ask these questions. It's not anti-investment to debate structure. It's what every resource-rich country eventually faces. Who truly controls the pace of national transformation? Is it the elected government? Is it the multinational operator? Or is it the structure of the agreement binding them together? Because here's the bigger picture. Oil wealth can transform a country. It can build infrastructure, upgrade healthcare, modernize education, and stabilize currency. But only if governance is strong enough to channel it effectively. Guyana stands at a historic crossroads. The boom is real. The revenue is rising. The global attention is intense. But the long-term outcome depends on something far less dramatic than offshore rigs. It depends on oversight. It depends on negotiation. It depends on institutional strength. And it depends on whether Guyana can gradually shift from being an oil producer operated by Exxon to being a fully empowered energy state directing its own destiny. So the next time you see headlines celebrating production records, remember this. The most important numbers are not just barrels per day. They are influence, leverage, and control. And that conversation is only just beginning. If you found this breakdown useful, subscribe for more deep dives into Caribbean energy, geopolitics, and the shifts reshaping our region. Because what's happening in Guyana doesn't stay in Guyana. It's changing the entire Caribbean balance.